This is an examination of the hidden human condition.
This is the Hidden Killers Podcast.
The Hidden Killers Podcast.
With Tony Brueski.
I do not envy defense attorneys one iota. They get a very bad rap when they're literally just trying to do the job that they're sworn in to do. There's good ones. There's bad ones. There's ones that are dealt cases that are simply not very winnable. One of those, in my opinion, honestly, would be the Bryan Kohberger case. I think Ann Taylor has her work completely cut out for her. She does have a great record as being a very good attorney, and she is simply doing her job. It's just, it can be on the outside looking in infuriating when you start to see kind of some of the stalling tactics, some of the let's try and find some sort of caveat to this case or some sort of error or some sort of technicality that maybe we can get you off on over here because everything else does not look so good. One of those being complaining about reporters, complaining about people talking about the case, speculating on the evidence that we know exists for the case. We've been seeing so much of it. And they're going to court going, well, it's too... Even going as far as getting an expert witness to break down who's been talking about what in this case and what kind of influence they have on the general public. At the end of the day, I have to question this and say, what's your point?
Yeah. I think, they're grasping at straws. I think that, on the defense side, obviously... they don't want to have cameras in the courtroom because that's going to, I think, limit their ability to recruit good experts. When you have a case like this where the odds are so against you and say it's going to be televised,
okay,
you're going to have a hard time, I think, getting, for example, I would be very hesitant to accept this case as a consultation from the defense side, because it just seems at this point, like it's not a winner of a case. And the fact that it would be televised would further, I think, disinterest me from participating, knowing that the odds are so stacked against you. So I think from that standpoint, that's one of the reasons that I can think of why they would try to, get a gag order.
Yeah. That's interesting because I don't think we've talked about it from that angle before of having expert witnesses when they testify, whether or not they could choose to or not, which obviously it's your choice. Somebody comes to you and says, hey, we'd like to hire you on this. We need your expertise in this area. You can choose whether or not you want to participate, correct? You
absolutely
have nothing to do with the case.
The time.
Sure.
A lot of people don't know that. I'll get a phone call from a lawyer on a case, and they'll say, hey, Mr. Roeder, would you like to, we would like you to consider doing the crime scene reconstruction for us on this particular case. And I say, and if I want to do it, I'll take it. If not, I'll say, no, I'm not interested. And that's perfectly up to my discretion as an independent expert. Now, on the defense side, and I'll give you a perfect example.
Yeah.
Do you remember the Johnny Depp trial?
Yes.
Where they called in that one expert who was a psychiatrist for defending the girl in that case.
Yeah.
And he was just making weird facial expressions and licking his teeth and doing all kinds of weird stuff. And they really handed him his lunch. Yeah. And it's on TV forever. That's the kind of stuff experts don't want. You don't want it to be turned into a meme, especially on a case that is a big loser.
Yeah. I mean, is that a big thing when it comes, because you're just going to provide your expertise. When someone hires the expert witness, you're not there to necessarily go down the path that they want you to go down. You're going to go down the path of, well, here's what the evidence shows us, and do with it what you will.
That's correct.
So
yeah, that's correct.
But then being on the side of a case that looks like it's pretty damning, this is probably not going to be a win. So no matter what I present, they're going to try and poke holes in it. Do you try and avoid being on the side of cases that are likely going to lose, even if you are just presenting the facts?
Well, that's really a great nuanced question and from an expert standpoint, it doesn't necessarily matter to me if the case that I'm working on wins or loses, okay? Because I don't get paid differently whether they win or whether they lose.
Sure.
Like, for example, a lawyer, they might get paid more if they win versus they might get paid less if they lose in certain civil matters, not necessarily criminal. But if the case, I guess is the best way to explain it. If I can stay within my realm of expertise and be impartial and do an analysis of all of the evidence relevant to my opinion, then it doesn't matter if we win or whether we lose. But if there's not much to really lay your expertise down on, and they ask you to take one piece of evidence or one very minor anomaly, and they want to turn that into something that they rest their case on, and you don't believe that it's conclusive enough to really put the weight of your expertise behind it, then no, I wouldn't take that case. For me, but I've been doing this a long time, is I try to take cases that I believe in.
Sure.
That I believe that the facts are that there's a real controversy as to the physical evidence and its interpretation, and that it will matter. But I have a little bit more of a luxury to do that at this stage of my career versus when I was just an expert, 3-5 years in.
Sure.
You take a more wide-reaching type of cases, and that's how you build up your expertise, so you can get that discernment of what cases you actually want to be involved in.
How often does it happen when you're new to this and a case or a defense needs someone to basically get something across, and maybe they're taking a look at just one piece of the pie of what you've come up, but they want to focus on that one piece because that's the one little piece that helps their client. The rest is not so much helping them. And they really want you to put a focus on that. How do you answer that? How do you go about, keeping your client happy, but still keeping your ethics and your credibility without it being pushed to look like you're just favoring this one little area? Is it about what they ask in court, and then cross can ask the other questions, and then you can paint the rest of the picture then?
Well, I think it's about how the lawyer approaches you and how they frame what your purpose is in the case.
Okay.
So if I have a lawyer come to me and say something, for the example of, hey, we've got this police-involved shooting case, and we would like you to review the full evidence and put together a reconstruction of what the most likely scenario is based on the physical and forensic evidence. For that, I'm like, yes, I'll do it. Absolutely. I'll take that case every time, because they're not giving me any prerequisites. Okay. Now, I have had situations where lawyers call me and they say, we've got this shooting case, or we've got this death case, or this criminal case, and we want you to illuminate that they couldn't see him at this particular moment and this and that. Well, I might not consider taking that case because they're telling me the result they want. Mm-hmm. And if they tell me the result they want, that tells me they're looking for me to give them the answer they want. And that's something that I would probably not take, because the lawyer already has a prerequisite in his mind of what he wants me to testify to, rather than leaving it up to me to do an independent analysis and tell him what I find versus him telling me what he wants me to find. That's the difference on why I would take a case and why I would pass up on a case.
Have you been in a situation like that where maybe early on you got into it, or you didn't even have any indication that they were wanting a specific outcome, and you did it, the outcome was not what they wanted, it did not bode well for them? What do you do at that point?
Well, I give them my full report, or before I give them my full report, I'll tell them something like, hey, I don't think you want me to testify in this case because what I found is not good for you. Uh-huh. And some of them will get upset and not pay the bill. Other people will understand that's how it goes, and they'll pay the bill, and then they won't call me to testify. And now, but that has a double-edged sword, because they have to disclose these witnesses ahead of time. And if opposing counsel sees that I was on the witness list, but yet I'm not being called to testify, they might subpoena me to testify as a hostile witness to the defense, which they could do in certain jurisdictions.
Interesting. So if they want to have an expert witness called in to identify something, they better be pretty sure that the outcome is that they expect is what they're going to get. Because if not, it could end up working against them.
It could. It really could. But that's, not every expert's like me, Tony. One of the big problems that we find in just the litigation world in its totality, and I'm not going to name any names, but there was this very noted expert in the police civil shooting environment, particularly on the defense side, who testified over 1,000 times. He's in his 70s, testified over 1,000 times, and never one time found the police at fault of an illegal shooting, right? Those kind of people exist.
Yeah.
And, I'm not trying to throw shade on anybody.
Sure, but it exists.
Because people try to make livings. But that's just my honest assessment. If you're an expert, let's say on, and you've never, particularly in the police-involved shooting world, because that's where I spend a lot of my time on police-involved shooting cases. If you're an expert and you've always only worked for the police and you've never found a bad shoot, or you've always only worked for the defense or for the plaintiff and you've never found a good shoot, I find your credibility is lacking if that's your scenario.
And that's probably very true. It's just the thing is the jurors that are in there in court don't necessarily know, all of the history of that witness that's coming up there to fully understand the context of what they're saying then.
Well, in cross-examination, I'm asked that question a lot. For example, they'll say, Mr. Roger, how many times have you testified on a police-involved shooting case? I'll say, 75 times. Uh-huh. And they'll say, out of those 75 times, how many were you hired defending the police and how many were you hired on the plaintiff side? I'll say it's about 60-40. Mm-hmm. And so, you try to keep those statistics, sure, so that you can prove that you're impartial.
Okay, and then a good cross would then ask that question if needed. Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. That's a whole role in this that it's interesting and fascinating to understand how that all works. I think one of the most interesting expert witnesses that we've seen in this last year was during the trial of Alec Murdaugh, where, and this was a bad expert witness, the cell phone witness, where how did you test throwing the phone? I just tossed it across my office. I think everybody's listening to that going, is this a joke? Is this like a comedy break in this? Like, this isn't truly part of the trial, is it? And they just, they railroaded him because it was like, who hired this guy? Who thought this would be a good idea?
Yeah, right. Yeah. And they had another expert when the Murdaugh called Dr. Timothy Palmbeck, a forensic science expert, who was actually one of my former instructors at the University of New Haven in Connecticut. And I thought it was a tough case, but he was talking about, the probabilities of this being a self-inflicted wound, or could the same person have shot both subjects, the wife and the son, with two separate guns, and how long it would take. And, he came up with, is it likely? Yeah, it's likely. Or is it possible? Yes, it's possible. But he was very honest on cross-examination by the state on that case, where he said, yes, you're right. I agree with that scenario. And as an expert, you have to give, you can't just dig your heels in and say, this is what I found and that's it. Because sometimes there's scenarios that they'll pose to you, which are, they're allowed to do that. They'll say, well, what if this? Is it still likely then? And if that makes it less likely or more likely, you should be honest about it. One of the instructions that we had, Dr. Henry Lee was also one of my instructors. And one of the tests that he gave us in class was he gave us this bag of broken windshield glass from a car. And we broke up into groups of 4. And the assignment was to reconstruct the glass, kind of like a puzzle, to find the bullet holes in the glass. But what we didn't know before the assignment was he withheld pieces from the glass so that you could not completely successfully do the reconstruction of the glass. So whoever said they couldn't raise their hand, well, we can't do the assignment, you passed. And the lesson was sometimes it's okay as an expert just to say, I can't do it.
You're consuming the Hidden Killers podcast.
Want more? Start binging on all of our true crime podcasts right now through Apple Podcasts and get an ad-free experience when you sign up to be a True Crime Today Premium Plus member exclusively on Apple Podcasts.
More of the Hidden Killers podcast dropping soon.
Press subscribe now.